One, who's winning? Betting markets, electoral college models, national polling averages. Who's winning, Kamala Harris or Donald Trump? Two, is sports just simply bread and circus a diversion from building not just a better country, but building a better man? Plus, where do we move in 2028 after Donald Trump? And why are young men, Gen Z, more religious than young girls? A wide-ranging conversation with the boys from the Ruthless podcast. Three, you know I'm fascinated by reclamation projects. You know I'm fascinated by Warren Buffett and applying it to sports. Buy low, sell high. So how do you go get the next Sam Darnold? My top quarterbacks for reclamation projects. Coming up on The Will Cain Show. It is The Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel and the Fox News Facebook page. Always on demand. If you're listening on terrestrial radio, something like a dozen markets coast to coast, just subscribe on Apple or on Spotify. You can listen to The Will Cain Show whenever and however you like. Or every Monday through Thursday at 12 o'clock Eastern Time. Come on over to the Fox News YouTube page, the Fox News Facebook page. Watch The Will Cain Show. Become a member of the Willisha. Jump into the comments section. We bring you in. And simply subscribe on YouTube at Will Cain Show. We've got a big show with you today. The boys from the Ruthless podcast are going to join us. We're going to break down everything inside and outside the world of politics, culture, and sports with some of my favorite guests here on the Will Cain Show. But I want to start today by figuring out, where are we just a little over a month before the race for president? Nate Silver, Harry Enton, betting markets seem to be all over the place. The debate didn't seem to move the needle in a significant margin for Kamala Harris. And yet, like an EKG monitor on a day-to-day basis, it seems to vacillate back and forth. Donald Trump, Kamala Harris, Donald Trump. So where are we today? Who's winning the race for president? Let's get into that with story number one. About as recently as a week ago, Nate Silver, who's managed to earn derision from both the left and the right, in my estimation, then therefore giving himself some semblance of credibility, was giving an electoral college prediction that the race was Donald Trump's. Now, this came in the wake of the debate for the presidency that most pundits suggested was won by Kamala Harris. He gave an electoral college model that said Donald Trump 312, Kamala Harris 226. That's from September 16th. This electoral college model, the only real models that matter more than any national polling average, gave Donald Trump wins in Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Michigan, and Wisconsin. The only, well, I guess now we would describe it as a battleground state, won by Kamala Harris, would be Virginia. This would be a landslide election. As was predicted here on the Will Cain Show, very recently, by Newt Gingrich. My brain was struggling. Who was it that gave us a landslide election prediction? And it was Newt Gingrich just about 2 weeks ago here on the Will Cain Show that predicted Dukakis versus Bush. And he said Kamala Harris would lose in the end significantly to Donald Trump. It seemed to have been backed up by Nate Silver. But then the polling began to change. In the last week or so, Nate Silver's model began to favor Kamala Harris. If you dig into swing state polling, according to the Silver Bulletin, Kamala Harris is up in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada. She's up by anywhere from roughly 1 to 3 points, an average polling margin nationally of 2.9%. Donald Trump maintained an edge in North Carolina, Georgia, and Arizona, anywhere from 0.4 to 1.5%. But what's interesting is if you dig into these numbers, what you have to compare it to is where was Joe Biden very similarly in 2020? Or what is the momentum in this particular election when it comes to polling? The last column on the latest Silver Bulletin is what caught my attention, the change from last month. We've talked about the impact of the debate. But even in states where Kamala Harris now has a margin of victory, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, it's moving in the direction of Donald Trump. In Pennsylvania, there's been a movement of 0.2% to Trump. In Michigan, 1%. In Wisconsin, 1.2%. In fact, if you dig into this, every single state listed shows movement towards Donald Trump, the biggest being Arizona, plus 3.1% change from the last month for Trump, except for Florida, which still is a Republican state by 3.8%, but showed a 0.7% trend to Democrats. These are tighter margins than were maintained by Joe Biden in his lead, and the momentum seems to now be moving in the direction of Donald Trump. Now, Silver's latest prediction for the presidency shows Kamala Harris. His electoral college probability, again, this is not a national polling average, which usually are worthless, shows 53.7% for Kamala Harris compared to 46% for Trump. And in this particular probability prediction, you see a big move for Harris over the past month and a half. Now, she's only been in the race for roughly, 3 months now. And Donald Trump maintained a significant advantage back in the summer when it was Joe Biden. If you're watching here in the Will Cain Show studios on YouTube or Facebook, you'll see a dotted line which represents Joe Biden leaving the race. And then you see it begin to tighten over the ensuing months to the point where now Harris has a 53.7 to 46% lead over Donald Trump. And that's reflected in current betting odds. This is real clear odds. Betting average currently has Kamala Harris at 52.4% to Donald Trump's 46.1%. Underneath that, it has Betfair, Bets in Bovada, BWin, PointsBet, Polymarket, Smart Markets, S Markets, all with a betting odd favoring Kamala Harris. The tightest among them is Polymarket at 49.46. I looked this morning, and Polymarket is even tighter than that particular, or not tighter, it actually favors Kamala Harris 51 to 48%. Polymarket's a fascinating website, by the way, and everybody points out Nate Silver works for Polymarket, and Polymarket's funded by Peter Thiel. Maybe you can dismiss everything as that's those on the left that recently hate Nate Silver. Maybe you can dismiss everything as everyone has a hidden agenda, but Polymarket is also millions of people betting on these elections. In fact, what you can see is almost $1 billion has been bet on the presidential election winner in 2024. 51% say Kamala Harris will win. Polymarket is fascinating, by the way. You can place bets on who'll win the popular vote. You can bet on which states tip the election. Will there be another debate? 23% chance, according to just over $1 million bet, that there will be another debate for the presidency. What's worth, you can also bet on the Super Bowl champions, Chiefs 16%, 49ers 11%. You can bet on Premier League winner. 41% say Manchester City, 38% Arsenal. I was talking trash with Piers Morgan this weekend over the Arsenal-Manchester City game. He claimed moral victory. I didn't know they gave trophies and parades for moral victories. No one's going to be trying to claim moral victory when it comes to the race for president. And the latest headline for this prediction from Nate Silver is who's favored to win the 2024 presidential election. Harris wins 57 times out of 100 simulations, according to Silver Bulletin. Trump wins 42 times out of 100. That is according to Silver Bulletin. Where do we stand today in the race for president? Trying to put our finger on the pulse, taking as many different sources into account as we can, not just Nate Silver, but betting markets. It looks like today Kamala Harris is in the lead for the presidency. All that matters, though, is the polls in Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And truthfully, all that matters isn't the polls, but the votes in those states. We've already entered the early voting stage, for example, in a state like Virginia. The game is on. If these predictions are correct, Kamala Harris is in the lead. Is it true? Let's break all that down coming up in just a moment with the boys of the Ruthless podcast coming up on the Will Cain Show.
The world of business moves fast. Stay on top of it with the Fox Business Rundown. Every Monday and Friday, Fox Business reporters, anchors, and hosts will bring you beneath the stock market speculation and boardroom drama to tell you about the biggest business stories of today. Whether you're on Main Street or Wall Street, Fox Business is invested in you.
Listen to the Fox Business Rundown every Monday and Friday at foxbusinesspodcasts.com or wherever you download your favorite podcasts. We're bringing forecasting grit to the gridiron. Fox Weather is storming the field with the risk of weather impact on the hottest NFL matchups all season long, delivering unmatched insight from the leader in weather news and how the forecast could affect your favorite players. We are taking you right into the end zone with Fox Weather's exclusive weather forecasting technology and the risk of weather impact for every single game of the regular season. Listen to Storming the Field every Friday on foxnewspodcasts.com.
It's time to take the quiz.
5 questions, 5 minutes a day, 5 days a week.
History, pop culture, science, sports, civics. How much do you know? Let's find out.
Who was the first person to walk on the moon?
Jackson or something?
Neil Armstrong.
Take the quiz every weekday at thequiz.fox and then listen to the quiz podcast to find out how you did.
Play, share, and of course, listen to the quiz right now at thequiz.fox.
Why are young men, Gen Z, more religious than young women for the first time in the history of America? Plus, we need to focus on 2024, but I can't help but be fascinated by what happens after Donald Trump. Where do we go in 2028? Let's talk about that here with story number 2 and the boys of the Ruthless podcast joining us on the Will Cain Show. What's up, fellas?
Hey, how you doing, Will? Thanks for having us, Will.
Yeah, what's going on, man?
Ashbrook, you got your first win in fantasy football. Proud of you. Something I haven't been able to accomplish. I'm 0-3. You've managed to rise up from the depths in the cellar. You're 1-2.
Yeah, it was a big week. Brock Purdy had a nice Sunday, and I was really happy with the outcome. I got you this coming week. I don't know if you saw that.
No, I'm not. I hadn't focused. I hadn't looked forward yet, but I will in time because this is getting embarrassing. For the friends of the Will Cain Show Fantasy Football League, for Will Cain to be in dead last is an absolute embarrassment. It's a fun league. We got Byron Donalds, Andy McCarthy, A.J. Przinsky, former Major League Baseball star, all in the league, and John Ashbrook, who, as I mentioned, got his first big win this weekend. Fellas, I just broke down.
NFL win, though. I just want to point out the Bengals lost on Monday Night Football, which cost us our Ruthless parlay, where we parlay all of our teams into one bet. The Broncos won, the Colts won, the Vikings won, and then Ashbrook dropped the ball last night. We're very disappointed.
Yeah, our defense has some holes.
That's each of
you can relate to.
When does Joe? Yeah, yeah, I can relate to it. I will say I saw something that made me happy. It was like, when does Joe Burrow get the same treatment as Dak Prescott? He's 0-3, and he's whatever he is, second best quarterback in the NFL. He's 0-3.
He's not cooked. He was 29 for 38, 342 yards last night.
You know what?
Threw 3 touchdown passes.
Will, I don't call him Joey B. I call him Joey Quarter B for the $250 million contract he signed, and I'd love to divide that by the number of wins he's had since he inked that deal.
Somebody said this all went downhill for Burrow when he started dressing like a lesbian. That's when it all went downhill for Joe Burrow.
Yep, it's outrageous. The guy's the best quarterback in the NFL.
I need to break down though of whose team is who. So Ashbrook's got the Bengals, and you rattled off the Broncos, the Vikings, and what was the fourth team? You got to tell me whose is who.
Yeah, me, for your listeners, Michael Duncan. I'm from Indianapolis originally, Colts fan. tried and true. We got our own struggles, but we're not as bad as the Bears, thankfully. So we managed to eke one out.
And Smug for your listeners.
And
I'm
Smug,
the Broncos fan, born in Denver. I wish we could get Peyton or John Elway back.
Yeah, and then Holmes,
and that
who
leaves
is
Holmes
not with us,
for
is
the
the
Vikings.
Vikings fan. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, we got 3 of the 4 of Ruthless here today. I'm curious what you guys think. I woke up this morning, and this is one of my favorite things to do as I get older. I went to breakfast with some of my buddies, and maybe it's like I'm turning into the old man, having coffee at the gas station and breaking down the world's problems. But, I do this maybe once a week, just have breakfast with my friends. I'm too old now to have happy hour, and my life doesn't fit happy hour. I've got kids I'm taking to various places. So breakfast becomes the thing. And everybody was, there was 2 conversations at breakfast this morning. One was, how was Glenn Youngkin? I just interviewed Glenn Youngkin, and a discussion of the vision of the Republican Party after Donald Trump. We'll get to that in a moment here with you guys from Ruthless. But also, where are we? These are all guys who have, admittedly been very successful in life, so they're gravitating and they're attracted to things like betting markets. They're rattling off the latest from Nate Silver. So we just broke it down for the audience here on the Will Cain Show, and everything seems to suggest right now, from betting markets to Nate Silver and electoral college maps, that right now Kamala Harris is winning the race for presidency.
Yeah, I'd say that on paper, but I think the important thing to remember, Will, is that Donald Trump's actually performing better in 2024 than he was in 2020 or 2016 at this point, at this snapshot in the fall before Election Day. And, Donald Trump, probably more than any politician in the history of our country, outperforms his polling. We've seen that both in 2020 and obviously 2016. But I mean, everyone in 2020 was predicting a landslide for Joe Biden, and it came down to 40,000 votes over like 6 states. So with all of that information, and not just theoretical like a poll, but actual votes, you got to feel pretty good if you're Donald Trump. But to the other point of your whole table setter, which I thought was fantastic, by the way, and I think you got the right guess for it. I loved everything. It is early voting now, absentee by mail now. So, over the course of the next week and 2 weeks, as we get reports back from Secretary of State's offices in places like Virginia and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, we're going to get some ground truth. We're going to start to see real numbers of real votes in the bank. And I think we'll be able to make more educated guesses based on that.
Do you guys, I'll put it to you, Ashbrook and Smug as well, do you put, to Michael's point, much optimism if you're a supporter of Donald Trump, in that what we're seeing some reports of is a good job by Republicans, the RNC, of registering more Republican voters than in the past? So, for example, Michael mentioned Pennsylvania, right? So I saw last night that there's some county in Pennsylvania where Republicans have hit record-setting numbers of registered voters. And you'd like to think that is the type of thing that translates into better than in the past when it comes to early voting.
Yeah, it's huge for Republicans. I mean, the RNC is putting a big emphasis on that particular thing this year. There's this guy, Scott Pressler, the tall guy who's out there in Pennsylvania signing people up left and right. But I think Republicans have another advantage heading into November that Democrats do not. And that's, we've had a year of practice. Remember, there was a long primary for President Trump to recapture the nomination, and he got the practice swings in Iowa and New Hampshire. Remember how organized his team was to beat the other candidates in those states. A lot of people forget it. Democrats, they just worked in a back room to swap their candidates. They haven't had any practice in a long time, and I think it's going to show in November.
Yeah.
Smug, if you were making a prediction right now, I gave you Nate Silver's prediction, which, by the way, Nate Silver's predictions are a thermometer, not a thermostat. I don't know if that's the exact right analogy. They change. Like, he tells you where he is today. He may be different next week. Polymarket's more interesting, although that's also a gauge. It's a gauge of today. So if I'm asking you, Smug, right now, what do you think? 51 Kamala, 48 Trump. What is your reading of where we'll be in November?
Well, I think Trump's in it to win it. I think I would go with Trump winning this election. You'd mentioned how it's like a thermometer, not a thermostat, specifically because what Nate Silver does is he creates models of probability. So it's like you had described earlier that in a simulation of 100 elections, Donald Trump wins 42 of them. And we've seen simulations in the past. Nate Silver took a victory lap because he was the only pundit who I think he had 20 out of 100 simulations, Trump winning in 2016. And everyone else had Trump at maybe like a 1% chance. So I think given, again, like Duncan was saying earlier, compared to the position Trump was at in 2016 and 2020, I think he's in a stronger situation right now and more likely to win the presidency.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned that, but that's him. Duncan said it, like Trump underpolls. That's historically true, and this is a better scenario, a better picture today for Trump than he's been in the past. So if that's true, if he underpolls, then it could end up being. When you feel good, Smug, about Trump, do you feel so good then, and this is to all three of you, I'm just curious, we'll go around the horn real quickly, that you would agree with a guy like Newt Gingrich? This is like Dukakis. This actually could be Silver's model from September 16th. This could be a landslide for Trump.
So the only thing that worries me is overconfidence because like Duncan said, ballots have just gone out. The polls don't matter. What matters is the votes. So I don't want people hearing this that, oh, Trump's in a better position. You know, we can rest on our laurels and everyone, you know, celebrate on election day. No, now's the time we see we're in a good position to close this. And now's the time to actually win the game. When the ballots are out, we need to make sure our neighbors, if we live in these states, know, hey, it's time to bank that vote. Do it now. You don't know what's going to happen on election day. It could rain. It could be a blizzard. Your kid could get sick. You could have a million other things to do. Take care of that one thing you need to do now and take care of it. Just don't even worry about it.
And it also make the president's campaign way more efficient. Like if you go in and bank your vote early by, voting in person early, then they can take you out of the list of voters they got to contact. They don't have to send you a text. They don't have to call you. They don't have to knock on your door, and allows the Republican Party to focus more on low propensity voters. That's been a huge emphasis of both the Trump campaign and the RNC, because in a presidential election year, you have a lot of people who don't normally vote in midterms or in local races show up and be like, I want to be part of this. That's where our real opportunity is in growing the tent for the Republican Party, is the hardcore people show up early, bank their vote so that they can focus resources on getting low propensity voters to turn out for the Republican Party.
Yeah, I think this election is a jump ball, to be honest with you. It is very, very close, and it's going to be decided by 40 or 50,000 votes in these key states we've already talked about. And if people aren't getting out, Kamala Harris could walk away with a victory. So everybody has to focus right now on finishing very, very strong. The Trump campaign is not resting on their laurels thinking that, oh, Newt Gingrich says it's a landslide, so therefore we can just mail it in for the next 4 weeks. They're working their asses off, and it shows, at least from the outside looking in. And I think, man, this election is going to be very similar to what we saw in 2020. We have an evenly divided country, and we need to make sure that every single person who likes Trump comes out and votes.
All right, I want to bring you guys, I think you're the perfect guest for the other conversation I had this morning at breakfast. And the impetus was that last Friday I sat down, met for the first time the governor of Virginia, Glenn Youngkin. And there is a certain type of conservative that shows a lot of interest in Glenn Youngkin. And that type of conservative might be you guys. I'd be curious. You guys, I don't know that all four of you did, but did you all work for Mitch McConnell, or was it just a couple of you that were in the shop?
Yes, Smug didn't, but I did, and Ashbrook did, and Holmes did. Yeah. The 2014 campaign and the 2020.
Smug was quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, Smug was quick. Almost proudly said he did
I'm
not.
more of a grassroots guy.
Yeah, right. Okay. The New York guy. Yeah.
So this version of conservatism, this particular Republican, is very enthused by Glenn Youngkin. There is another, and I'll be interested to see if this other is represented by Smug, who would say, and I've had this said to me specifically in these words, my spidey sense is up about Glenn Youngkin, and that he represents a return to what was left behind when the Republican Party was reshaped by Donald Trump. In other words, he is Mitt Romney. The accusation is that here you're talking about a private equity guy, a deal maker worth $500 million, a country club Republican. Now, Youngkin has managed through his gubernatorial races and being the governor of Virginia to sort of thread a needle where he's in touch with the issues that are important to MAGA. At least he was in 2021 when he was elected. the educational issues, the cultural issues, CRT. But I sense this, and I know everybody's focused on 24, as well they should be, but I can't help but be fascinated by what comes after Donald Trump. He told Cheryl Atkinson this weekend in an interview, the former CBS reporter, that he wouldn't run in 28 if he loses. That's what was said by Donald Trump, which leads to what is the Republican Party after Donald Trump? And I sense that if it's Youngkin, there's going to be a big debate between MAGA and the establishment about whether or not he adequately represents both wings of the party.
Well, I would say about Glenn Youngkin, he's a very interesting case in that from the outside, you might think he looks like a polished country club Republican like Mitt Romney. I can understand that they'd be worried about that, but you actually look at what he's been doing, and he's been governing as a staunch conservative. It's terrific. You look at his record, what he's been doing in terms of education, and how strongly he's been standing with President Trump in Virginia, which is not a very easy state to be openly Republican these days. He's been standing strong, supporting President Trump, and beyond that, you see his record of going out across the country, working to elect other Republicans in other states. I see him as a team player.
I think there's also a fundamental question that needs to be asked is like, what is MAGA without Donald Trump? Right? Because, you could throw Brian Kemp into that same bucket with Glenn Youngkin, and, Donald Trump recruited a primary opponent, David Perdue, to Kemp in Georgia. But Georgia, it was a swing state, and Brian Kemp is a rock rib conservative. If you look at the legislative history that he was able to accomplish electoral reform, heartbeat bill, also all sorts of things, rock rib conservative. He ended up winning that primary by like 50 points.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I think like Donald Trump is a man himself, and what he is, I don't know necessarily through transitive property goes forward to somebody else who wants to pick up the MAGA banner. I'm sure many will try, but I think for, Republican politicians, the Republican Party writ large, we should just look for conservatives who actually can get things done. And I think like Brian Kemp and Glenn Youngkin are perfect examples of that. I don't think we need to be like scared of our shadow back to 2012 and Mitt Romney. I don't think either of them are Mitt Romney.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think, and by the way, I think that what Donald Trump has done has changed our party fundamentally in perpetuity, because there are so many people in our country who have felt overlooked for so long, people in flyover country that have now been given a voice. And any Republican who wants to win an election going forward cannot overlook that important segment of voters. And you have to look at something else. There is a section of the establishment that has moved themselves out of the Republican Party. I'm thinking of the Cheneys. I'm thinking of other Republicans who have worked for previous presidential campaigns who are now supporting socialist Kamala Harris. Those people will have no say in the future of the Republican Party because we're moving on as a different sort of coalition without them. And I don't think that our party is going to ever nominate somebody who looks like Mitt Romney again. It's going to look like a hybrid of what President Trump has done and what other Republicans say that we need to do to win. What Republicans need to do, we need to win. We need to get more votes than Democrats. And if we don't do that, they're going to ruin our country even more than they have over the last 4 years. And so I think for the future of our party, I think that what President Trump has built is going to last, and nobody is going to be him. Whoever runs again, whether it's Kemp, whether it's Youngkin, whether it's somebody else, none of that. They're going to have their own thing. But I don't think it's as simple as, oh, it's Mitt Romney or it's Donald Trump. I think it's going to be a hybrid of what Donald Trump has built that addresses problems that arise here in the next, 4 or 8 years.
Okay, I want to dig into what you just said, Ashbrook. I'm fascinated by this idea that republicanism or conservatism has been changed by Donald Trump and MAGA into perpetuity. So what I sense, here's the divide. There is an appetite to return to what was in the past. And I don't know how to describe that, okay? Are we going to call it respectability politics? Are we going to call it establishmentarian politics? But there is. I don't know how big that appetite is, but I do know that it exists to say, and I'm not going to put words in any one particular person's mouth, but move past Marjorie Taylor Greene, move past Matt Gaetz. I'm not endorsing this point of view. I'm describing for everyone watching and listening, and to you three, that I know this does exist within Republicanism. I made the argument in response, no, this has been a positive movement, as you just said, to focus on people who have been looked over in the past. And this populism within Republicanism is a net, not just a net, an overwhelming virtue, not a vice. Now, that same side would argue what you just did, Ashbrook. Yeah, but you have to win. And I understand that. I had a debate yesterday with Tommy Lahren. Like, you can't do a government shutdown 3 weeks before an election because you didn't get the SAFE Act. That's like literal insanity. You would lose the presidency and you would lose the House. You would lose everything. So you can't just like plant your flag on the smallest battles while you lose the war. So there is a pragmatism to party politics that you have to understand about winning. But if we're not going to go back, I want somebody who can take us forward by threading that needle, who can say, I understand the necessity to make deals. I understand the nature of politics. I also am a true believer in the new vision of republicanism. So who can I find? My whole pitch is move forward in this vision. It's not easy. I put to the three of you, to find someone that you trust actually is those two things. I think for a moment, no, I actually think now I believe Ron DeSantis is that merger. I also think Ron DeSantis has real limitations and a ceiling when it comes to retail politics. That's again, not cheerleading, that's analysis. I know Ron DeSantis fans get super offended and mad, but I would love it if he were really good at walking into a diner on Fox and Friends and working the crowd, because that's how you win elections. But I don't see it. I think, in fact, I see the opposite. I hope I'm proven wrong about DeSantis. And I don't know if it's Youngkin. And the question then becomes, if it is Youngkin versus, say, Donald Trump Jr., right? I agree with you, Duncan, by the way, about the transitive property, that Trump doesn't just, no one else is ready to inherit that MAGA label. I don't know. Trump Jr. has the same last name, and that will appeal in a lot of ways to a lot of people. I don't know how we thread this needle to progress forward to incorporate everything into one winning party.
Well, one thing I always say is that no one ever won a presidential election on someone else's movement, right? So you see, like, Trump didn't try to use George W. Bush's platform to run for president. George W. Bush didn't try to use Bob Dole's movement. So it'll have to be someone who has a unique appeal to voters. And I think a good example, maybe why not, Vivek Ramaswamy, who's built a humongous movement that is not, I am the heir to MAGA, but I'm out there speaking to people about what issues move them. And he saw the result of that. He saw a crowd develop around him wanting to listen to his message, which continues today. Everywhere he goes, people want to listen. Also, when it comes to, you said earlier, almost like a respectability, I kind of see that and winning as two separate issues, in that we've kind of entered this weird age where attention is the most important form of currency. And you don't just see it on the Republican side. You'll see AOC on the Democrat side. You'll see even the Kamala Harris campaign. They don't want to talk about any of her policies. They're like, oh, it's just Brett Summer. You know, this is vibes. That's all we're running on. So there has been, unfortunately, a movement more towards what can I do to get attention, as opposed to what can I do to solve people's problems. At the same time, I would say it's still important to find a way to engage, especially the youth vote. You see, Trump's been able to do that. Whether he's streaming with these streamers that have 1 million people watching live, young voters, you'd mentioned young males who typically campaigns don't even try reaching out to younger voters, taking them for granted, saying, oh, they're never going to vote. They're never going to do anything. But there's a significant audience out there interested in politics, who wants to be engaged, who wants to hear how we're going to make things better, especially when the other side said, there's no point in having kids. There's no future. We're all doomed.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would add to that, Smug.
Do you other two think?
Oh, go ahead.
Real quick, Duncan. No, yeah, just incorporate this into what you're about to say. Do you think Vivek's do you think Vivek's ceiling is really high enough to win a national election? See, the other thing about Vivek, and I'm a big fan, actually, of Vivek. To your point of attention, Smug, I worry that the right is getting increasingly good at creating valuable podcasts and not increasingly good at winning elections.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was pretty critical of Vivek during the primary, because it felt like a lot of one-upsmanship. Like Ron DeSantis would say something and he'd be like, I agree with that, but I think we should go further and do X. And that is the thing. And I think, like, when you're talking about where MAGA goes and where the conservative movement goes after the election, you got to recognize politics as a competition. Like, there's a competitive environment for that attention. And so a lot of people are going to be selling you a lot of different things. And a lot of people are going to be telling you, if only it was them, we actually would have accomplished the thing. We would have got the SAFE Act, in the budget deal or what have you. But somebody's letting you down and I'm the only one who can deliver it. Right. And so, like, that's something for the voters to suss out here in the future. But I would say, like, the one thing that Smug had mentioned about, Donald Trump didn't just pick up the mantle from George W. Bush and run his same platform, is like one of the things that Donald Trump really succeeded in was sort of like breaking this legacy politics in the Republican Party of, like, the next guy up is the oldest one who took second in the last election, right? Like, he was on stage with Jeb Bush and he's like, it should be the end of the Bush dynasty. If you make it somebody like Don Jr., aren't you just doing the same thing, right? So I worry about that component of it for Trump or the MAGA movement. I would just say, like, everybody's got to keep their powder dry and see what happens in November. That's going to tell us a lot more about where the future of the movement is. And there will be some autopsy if somehow Donald Trump comes up short about what we did wrong and what we need to do better.
Wait, so Ashbrook, let me do it this way. Okay, now I've been forcing you into this like, okay, let's look forward into the future, right? Youngkin, DeSantis, Vivek. Okay, I'm going to take that away. I'm giving you history. You have everybody you ever wanted. You have Reagan. If you want Teddy Roosevelt, you have Teddy Roosevelt. Who like, if who is it that you think actually could, if I'm right, needs to thread this needle? And by the way, I respect what Smug had to say. It's not threading the needle between MAGA and establishment. It's actually maybe something you had never considered yet, a new vision of the Republican Party. But still, it has to unite a base and an establishment. Give me it. Who is that person? You have history.
Well, here's the thing, man. We sitting here talking about this right now, we are not the people who decide those things. Those are decided by people who live in Iowa and New Hampshire and other early primary states. And the person who's able to thread that needle or provide a brand new vision for the Republican Party and for conservatives and people who need something more from their government than crackdowns on them and immigrants being shipped to their communities, that person will be sussed out in these early primaries. And whether it's Vivek, and I think he's a pretty exciting guy. I think he's got something fresh that he offers, unique ideas. I think that Brian Kemp's got something interesting to offer. I think Youngkin has something interesting to offer. The nice thing about a brand new slate of candidates, whether Don Jr. is a part of that, whether J.D. Vance, who's been really like killing it in interviews and speeches, and he's just gets better and better and better every time you hear him. Whoever that person is, Nikki Haley comes back, whoever that person is, that they're going to be chosen by Republican primary voters. And I can't sit here today and tell you who that's going to be.
He weaseled out of it.
You guys keep skipping Ron DeSantis. Yeah, I just keep noticing. You mentioned now you got Vivek. Then you got Vivek, Nikki Haley, JD, Glenn Youngkin, Brian Kemp. I mean, it's noticeable that you guys have not mentioned Ron DeSantis.
I did. Unintentional.
Sure.
I love Ronnie D. What he's done in that state with taking out the Python problem, it's very creative. I don't know if you followed this, Will, but he sets up a contest every year to remove this scourge of pythons from the southern part of the state. It's very creative. The guy is a can-do governor. I mean, there's a hurricane bearing down on Florida as we speak, and everybody knows that when that hurricane hits, Ron DeSantis is going to be there to help them when they need him. So the guy has something to offer. And maybe like glad handing in a diner isn't what people want. Maybe they want him to stand up and say, look, maybe I'm not the most friendly, gregarious personality, but I can get things done and I can win. And that might be the attractive message to people.
Did you see him twist a knife, Will? He said, this guy is weird in public and that he can't really backhand with people. What a backhanded compliment.
You can't win with these guys.
Man. Own it.
Ruthless.
Ruthless. Okay, I know so many people are like, probably, why are you focused on 28? You should be focused on 24. I don't know. The answer is because I'm fascinated by what happens after Donald Trump. So last question on this. I'm not going to let Ashbrook off the hook. So I'm going to do it in a more direct manner. Would Ronald Reagan, we're going to do several, so we don't have to, I just want to know your thoughts. Do you think in a primary race for president in 2028, Ronald Reagan could win?
Come as a governor in California who knocked off Gavin Newsom, maybe. I mean, if Ronald Reagan were running for governor in California and somehow turned that state red again, people around the country are going to be interested in how he won. I think what people will want is a winner. They want somebody with a track record of winning. And if we're in a horrible scenario where Kamala is president, everybody is going to want to win. And I think that will be an important component in whoever's running.
So, I mean, I have a controversial opinion on this. I would say no. And I probably wouldn't vote for him in a primary because he passed amnesty. And the biggest problem that we have right now, the chairman of the Federal Reserve said unemployment's going up because we have illegal aliens pouring across the border. We need someone who's going to actually address the problems now. And right now, front of mind for all voters is the economy and illegal immigration. And now we've seen those aren't two separate issues. That's one issue.
Good point.
Yeah, I guess the other thing I would say is,
That's
is he running against Donald Trump? You know, because if he's running against Donald Trump, that's a tough election for Ronnie. You know, I mean, I would love to vote for Ronald Reagan. I wish I could have, wasn't born yet, unfortunately. But, you know, I mean, people just trust Donald Trump. It's attitudinal, Will, to your point of people want to fight her. It's less about the policy. I mean, I would point out that Donald Trump has the most moderate position on abortion of anyone who ran in the Republican primary, and Donald Trump won evangelicals in Iowa by double digits. So how do you make sense of that? Well, you only make sense of that because he has such a connection to the Republican primary electorate that they just trust he's going to do the right thing, that he is going to deliver them the success that they want. And so he's entirely his own thing, unlike any other candidate we've ever seen in our lifetime.
Yeah. I mean, the guy took a bullet, jumped up and said, fight, fight, fight.
Yeah. Just incredible.
That is original. That is one of a kind. Yeah, I mean, I like what you had to say, Smug. I do think that you have to be original. You have to re-envision. I also think, you guys know Tim Dillon, the comedian, right?
Yeah.
He's got a new show on Netflix.
Yeah,
and it's going to be a hit.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not original. It is basically Jerry Springer. He's brought back Jerry Springer. And I was looking at that the other day and thinking, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Things keep coming back, you know? And I think, okay, well, who would it be? JFK? I just spilled water all in my studio. Who is it? Is it JFK? Is it, could George W. Bush win the Republican primary? And so forth. So I don't know. I want to move to this really quickly. One of my producers saw this tweet. I don't know who this guy is, but he's one of these self-help business guys. I'll read it for you. But number one productivity hack. I don't watch sports on TV. I used to spend 10 to 20 hours per week watching and paying attention to college and pro sports, now barely any. You always have time if you make it. It's part of this idea that, sports is bread and circus. It's a diversion. And there's a lot of guys on the right who are making that argument now. And it's used to keep you from building not just a better country, but becoming a better man. What do you guys think about sports being an unnecessary exercise in bread and circus?
I think that's a nerd opinion, honestly. And I would love for you to go to that person's handle on Twitter and scroll back a couple years and see the things they tweet about. Is it Star Wars? Is it Star Trek? Is it Dungeons and Dragons? There's a lot of things that are distractions in life. And distractions are healthy. It's a coping mechanism for human beings. We've been doing it since cavemen painted on walls thousands of years ago. It's okay to have a period of your day where you turn your brain off. I don't get this obsession.
I totally agree.
It happens every single fall. You've got me very animated. It happens every single fall. Right as football season starts up, you've got some of these nerds on Twitter talking about sports ball and bread and circuses and all this BS. Okay, fine. All right. What book did you publish today? It's I've got two kids. I got two kids. I got two jobs, including this podcast and a consulting firm. We work 14 hours a day. We're raising kids. I deserve some time to not have to think about that. I've got hobbies, everybody has hobbies.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I wish it was bread and circus. I wish you could watch sports and have time to completely unplug, but then you'll have ESPN being today's George Floyd award goes to, and it's like, are you serious? These people who try to say this stuff like it's a distraction from your grind set and rising grind, they need better time management. It's that simple. Like if you can actually manage your like you can do things other than work. It's really surprising, and it's necessary and healthy for people to be able to have some time for themselves to unwind, or else, I mean, I've seen people, when I worked in finance, who were putting in actual 100-hour weeks, and they became miserable people at work. They became miserable people at home on their second or third wives.
Yeah.
It's not healthy to do that to yourself.
Right. And it's also people who just are mad internally and they never say this because they're not part of the conversation.
Yeah.
They don't get it. Fine. Okay, fine. Just say nothing. But they can't do that, Will. What they got to say is, this is bread and circuses. This is keeping you from reading this latest treatise from some white paper. And it's like, dude,
which is total bullshit. They're not doing that.
It is. It's a garbage take. It's like, this is just like they did in the Roman Empire. And I'm sure watching the Gladiators was great. It wasn't the NFL. And I just am so thankful that we have the NFL for as long as we do in the fall. And by the way, sports are good for kids.
Yep.
I mean, playing youth sports is one of the best development things that any kid could do. It teaches you how to win, how to lose, how to be a part of a team, how to make yourself better. I mean, if you were just sitting in your room playing video games, I actually think that video games have a benefit. But if you were just sitting by yourself, not interacting with other people, you never learn how to interact with other people. And that ruins society.
Yeah.
It ruins you as a person.
Yeah.
I love that. Because I have this self-reflection going on, because I've certainly invested in sports when it comes to my kid. And we probably, if you're like dividing up time devoted, it's way too much. It's not right. So, but then I reverse justify it like, no, you're learning all of these things that apply to life. And I think it is true. Everything you just laid out, Ashbrook. And then I think about individual development as well. My boys play soccer and then football, but they're the kicker and the punter on the football team.
That's the best way to get scholarship.
I'm gonna
no concussions, free ride.
There's only one or two spots. But like last night, one of my kids' coaches, and he's got a pretty hardcore coach, which I've hinted at a couple of times on this show, but he said to my son, "Good job, but next time, do it less effeminate, do it more masculine." And I'm like, "That's wonderful." He said, "Can you be more mean?" And I'm like, this is actually good. I want my kid to be forced to be like a little more mean. He's the nicest kid in the world, and he's pretty good, but how much better would he be if he was a little mean? But even beyond that, I don't know, I've talked about this and never to you guys. There's a thing called, I get fascinated by this when it comes to soccer, but called OODA loop. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. OODA loop is an acronym. It was developed by John Boyd, who developed the F-16, famous American fighter pilot. And it's a fluid thing, right? A dogfight. So the idea is the guy that's going to win the dogfight, if you set aside technology, is the guy that can observe, orient, decide, and act, and then loop through that process the fastest. So you have to observe what's going on, orient yourself within the action, make a decision, act, and then because you've acted, you've changed the state of play, go back to observation again really quickly and go through it. So the best player is the guy intellectually that can do that. And that's what they're learning in sports, and I apply it to everything in life. They open a car door and bang it into the next car parked next to us. I'm like, did you OODA loop that? Did you see that there was a car there? Did you think through? And I think it's everything. It's politics. It's business. Like, just think through. The point of this monologue is, to Ashbrook's point, I think sports is the perfect mechanism to make yourself better, not just rise and grind and pretend like you read, to Duncan's point, treaties you don't really read.
Yes, exactly. I mean, what it comes down to is like processing adversity, right? And every kid has to learn that in sports. You come into conflict with something and you have to resolve it. And sometimes you're going to fail. That's also super, super healthy for kids to learn. But you also learn, why do we have all these problems today in society where it's like kids are overwhelmed by anxiety and things and like they can't overcome problems and it's always somebody else's fault? Well, it's because they've never been in front of a group of people and lost and had to get better. And that's why sports, I think, is so healthy for society.
And I would also argue the most beneficial thing about sports and competition happens off the field, because the most important lesson for a young person to learn is that all the gains you get, all the benefits, do not come instantaneously. They can see that the hard work that they put in, day out, practicing, trying to get better, and then they can go look back 6 months, a year, and reflect upon the progress that they've made, they learn the most valuable lesson of life, which is where if you put in the work, it may not necessarily get you a round of applause immediately, but it improves you as a person. That's the whole point.
Yeah, that's such a good point because it's the opposite of what kids get when they're on an iPad. On an iPad, you download the app. It takes 3 seconds. You open the app. If it's not working, you close it. You'd re-download. Like
you scroll to the next YouTube video.
Instant gratification. Yep. That is the opposite of
That's
life.
it.
And what Smug said is exactly
that's what Warren Buffett says that's the biggest predictor of success. Can you have a kid who understands delayed gratification? You know, the marshmallow test. Put them in a room by themselves, one marshmallow. And you tell them, if you don't eat it, you'll get 2, right? And the kid that can pass up eating the marshmallow is the kid that understands delayed gratification and a huge predictor for success. I've teased it, so I want to get to it before I let you guys go. Fascinating article in the New York Times, Gen Z men more religious than young women, and it's the first time that's been seen in American history. Pretty fascinating. And I can say with 2 young men in my house, I think it's true. I look around at high school, I look around at their lives. It's pretty interesting on their own, you know, moving in that direction. I don't know what it says about young ladies, but I think that's a really healthy sign for the future of America.
I think so. I mean, you look at right now where young men are that are growing up. For the past decade, they've been told that they're toxic, that they're unwanted, that they're predators, that they don't provide any value, that they should be left behind the workplace. You see women are now graduating at a much higher percentage than males. And so religion is a healthy place for young men to see guidance and affirmation and see that there is something beyond this world where we're surrounded by noise and social media, which I would say also on the other side of the coin has had a really deleterious effect on women, where so much of the focus can be on like, what is someone on Instagram saying a nice house looks like? Should I be on a yacht in Italy because this person on Instagram says I should be on a yacht in Italy? So it's had a very, bad effect in terms of what younger women are focused on. We've seen the hit that's had on their self-esteem.
Yeah, I think we're definitely seeing the pendulum swing back in society for all of the points that Smug mentioned. Is this instant gratification culture, the scrolling of Instagram, the I want it now stuff, vain things is like, I think the youth of today are like starting to look back to like, how does my life have value and what is a valuable life? And so like, that's a really, really good sign. I hope. And Ashbrook has 3 girls and they're older than my boys. So maybe he's got more.
And they're great kids, so he's got advice on this.
Well, that's only because of my wife. 100% my wife. But I think, it's interesting that they broke it down between men, boys and girls. But I do think that girls in the coming up generation, I think that there is sort of a desire from them to have the same sort of real meaning in life than that you don't get from Instagram. It's like, oh, wait a minute, 1,600 likes on a post doesn't actually equal value. It equals 1,600 likes on a post. Mm-hmm. So people are looking for something more than technology has to offer. And I think that is a very good development for society.
Last thing I want to say is I think what's really sad beyond the way that, young men have been maligned is there's no longer a space for young men. I was lucky when I was growing up in Colorado, there were the Boy Scouts. We could get our BB guns. We'd go out hunting. We'd learn how to tie knots. We'd learn how to fish. That space is no longer for young men. You go to a Home Depot and you see Boy Scouts selling popcorn and it's 3 girls at the table. Society no longer allows young men to have a space for themselves to develop and become better people.
Mm. In general, there's no men's, it's not just young men, right? No more male only country clubs. They're a real rarity. There's been people have been writing about the mental health status of men and how much you need that sort of male space in your life. All right, Michael Duncan, Comfortably Smug, John Ashbrook. It's the Ruthless Podcast. Go subscribe. Thank you guys for spending so much time with me today on the Will Cain Show.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Will.
All right, take care, guys. Great podcast. You guys should go check them out. Subscribe to the Ruthless Podcast. I always appreciate them being here on the Will Cain Show. All right, speaking of Warren Buffett, buy low, sell high. I've been talking about this when it comes to quarterbacks. I'm fascinated by the reclamation project that is Sam Darnold in Minnesota. But can we apply that? Not just to Bryce Young, benched in Carolina, but I've got a theory on who exactly and how exactly you play this game. Everyone else is playing one game. You got to win by playing a different game. I've got the idea. Coming up next on The Will Cain Show.
Stay on top of the latest forecast with America's Weather Team in the palm of your hands.
Here's the latest from America's Weather Center.
It's Fox weather updates throughout your busy day, every day.
That heat's going to be out there for one more day.
Temperatures being 30 degrees above average.
Put the power of over 100 meteorologists and the worldwide resources of Fox in your hands with the Fox Weather Podcast. Precise, personal, powerful. Subscribe and listen now at foxnewspodcasts.com. We're bringing forecasting grit to the gridiron. Fox Weather is storming the field with the risk of weather impact on the hottest NFL matchups all season long, delivering unmatched insight from the leader in weather news and how the forecast could affect your favorite players. We are taking you right into the end zone with Fox Weather's exclusive weather forecasting technology and the risk of weather impact for every single game of the regular season. Listen to Storming the Field every Friday on foxnewspodcasts.com.
I'm Dana Perino, co-host of The Five and co-anchor of America's Newsroom. Join me for my podcast, Perino on Politics. Listeners of Everything Will Be Okay will gravitate toward this podcast too. Every Monday, I'm going to talk to people I trust in politics as they tell me what they're seeing and thinking in the 2024 election cycle. As they prep me to cover the upcoming election, they'll prep you, the voters, too. Make sure you subscribe to this series on foxnewspodcasts.com or wherever you download podcasts and leave a rating and review.
All right, how do you build? By value proposition. How do you rebuild your team? How do you get the right quarterback? It's the Will Cain Show. Streaming live at foxnews.com on the Fox News YouTube and Facebook channels, and always on demand on podcasts by subscribing at Apple or on Spotify. Let's bring in the boys. Tinfoil Pat, Young Establishment James. I know Justin has a lot on this topic as well, right, Justin? You're ready to go.
Oh, I'm ready.
Talk about quarterbacks. Right. Okay, good. Been warned Justin has nothing on sports as he fills in for Two-A-Days Dan. Now married, by the way. On his honeymoon, he's married off. Our boy done grown up. So nice.
There's only one bachelor left.
And he's young. Justin, are you married?
I am. Almost 5 years now.
Okay, so yeah, how's it going?
So far, so good.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's just Young Establishment James.
I got married just before COVID
You lucked
hit,
out?
so we didn't have to cancel or any of that.
Oh, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Got your honeymoon in?
Yeah. Yeah, it was October
Where'd you go?
of 2019. We actually went to Disney.
World?
Mm-hmm. Disney World.
Nice. Yeah. You stay at, what'd you do? Animal Kingdom? Where'd you stay?
Grand Floridian and a timeshare.
Oh, yeah. Nice. Nice. Do a little Epcot, a little taste of the world.
Did it all, yeah. I like Epcot the best personally, yeah.
I'm not messing with you, actually. Spend 5 years at ESPN, which is a Disney-owned company. You get into the parks for free.
Oh, yeah.
And you get half price on the hotels. And I'm not an amusement park guy, so I would kind of make fun of that stuff until I went. And I was like, oh, I kind of get it. Like, it's pretty amazing. Meaning those resorts are, like, you feel like you're somewhere else, wherever that is, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Polynesian. And then like the Animal Kingdom Park, like you walk around parts of that and you feel like, this is kind of feels like authentically like an African village right here, you know, with the markets and so forth. And then I love that about Epcot. Like you walk from country to country and they do a good job in like a little bit of space to make it feel like you're really there.
Oh, yeah.
I don't poo-poo.
You get to eat and drink your way around the whole world, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty fun. All right. Honeymoon at Disney. Here's my proposition. Always been fascinated by Warren Buffett. I'm always fascinated by zigging when everyone else is zagging. I believe in the wisdom of crowds, but I also think the crowds are capable of huge mistakes. That's the nature of capitalism. It's the best we've got, but that doesn't make it perfect. Markets are inefficient. There's manias. And can you zig when everyone else is zagging? I also think that sports is a groupthink world. It just is. I don't think it's filled with geniuses. It's getting smarter, but I think it's represented plenty of opportunity to see everyone else is fascinated with hand size. Well, maybe my quarterback won't end up with 10-inch hands. Maybe he can actually be good regardless of how many inches his fingers are. This is made famous, of course, with Moneyball and Billy Beane with the Oakland A's in baseball, talking about everybody's captured by this one set of thoughts. Well, what if we re-envision it with a different metric and find players who can really play? Well, in the NFL, groupthink is defined by finding the right quarterback in the top 10 picks of the NFL draft. It's home runs. It's basically home runs. It's like there's no on-base percentage in the NFL. There's no development. There's no singles. It's all like hit the home run or not. Did I get my savior at the quarterback position? Did I not? And I had a tweet go viral this week that Clint Kubiak is doing what he's doing with Derek Carr. Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota is doing what he's doing with Sam Darnold. Of course, Kyle Shanahan's doing what he's doing with Brock Purdy. And there's more and more examples of coaches and teams finding guys who were either not drafted high or who were already discarded on the trash heap and developing them into a winning quarterback. I saw Kurt Warner, Hall of Fame quarterback, respond to my tweet last night. Well, we'll see. If one of these guys wins the Super Bowl, then I'll believe. And that's a legitimate point. The point is not to be 3-0 in the first 3 weeks of the season. It's to win the Super Bowl. And historically, top quarterbacks out of the draft have been the guys to actually win it all. There are exceptions. Jeff Hostetler with the Giants, but they are exceptions. So here's my proposition. If this is the current groupthink, modus operandi in the NFL, but yet history also suggests you got to have one of these highly talented guys, a top 10 pick, we should be adopting the Warren Buffett philosophy of buying low when everyone else is discarding on the trash heap. But here's the key. They're not lotto tickets that you just buy one of. When you go play the lotto, do you buy one ticket or do you buy 5 to 10 tickets, right? And hope that one of those numbers, because the point is they're dollar tickets, or I don't play the lotto, or whatever it is. They're cheap, right? And with Bryce Young being benched in Carolina, the argument isn't, well, let's give a big draft pick for Bryce Young and see if we can be the one that, turns him into our savior. It's you can get him for a 6th round pick. And you do that. And you bring in Bryce Young. And you know what else you do? This will make Tinfoil Pat happy. You bring in Jameis Winston. You bring in Mac Jones, former, was he a top 10?
15th overall.
Top 12 pick?
15th overall.
Yeah. 15th overall, discarded by New England. Horrible situation in New England, bad coaching, bad development, and now a backup in Jacksonville. Hell, you may soon be able to do it with Trevor Lawrence. He seems to be headed in a bad spot with Jacksonville. But my point is, you can't do more than 3, really, but you buy 3 lotto tickets. And you see, and I know there's only so much development that is done in the NFL and only so many snaps in training camp and practice, but you play the odds and you buy low multiple times. And if you question whether or not that's been done, I give you the best example possible. Before Brock Purdy won the job in San Francisco, they had on their roster Trey Lance, drafted in the top 5, Sam Darnold, drafted in the top 5, and Brock Purdy. All of them, lotto tickets. Lance, the only expensive lotto ticket. They got Darnold off the trash heap from the Jets. They took Purdy in the 7th round. You keep stacking up on low cost, maybe low probability, but low cost lotto tickets, quarterbacks with high pedigree, I would argue, too. And I'm not here to tell you, you get Mac Jones and you're for sure going to be able to reclaim him, or no, you get Jones. You go get, I don't happen to believe that Jameis is one of the guys you get. You'll get Jones. You get Bryce Young. You get 2 or 3 of these guys, and you bank on a coaching staff finding among them your Brock Purdy. That's my model that I would go for. If the Dallas Cowboys had decided to move on from Dak Prescott and not pay him $60 million a year, and now you're in the wilderness, this would be my map in the wilderness. Go hoard lotto picks. What do you think?
Now, I'm with you. I completely agree. And this is something that I never understood, but people will claim that you can't have too many alpha quarterbacks because like one will feel threatened by the other. I don't think that's true, but what do you think?
Then he's not
like
alpha. If he's not, then he's not
like
alpha.
Aaron Rodgers was threatened by Love, and Favre was threatened by Rodgers,
But we're not in a situation where we already have Aaron Rodgers. All of these guys have to know they're not the guy. You're competing to be the guy. And if you're afraid of that competition, then you're not the guy. That's what's clear. It's fine that Brett Favre didn't want Aaron Rodgers there. It's fine that Aaron Rodgers didn't want Jordan Love there. I get that. That's rational. I'm not going to develop the guy you brought in to replace me. But we're talking about guys who have nothing, guys who've already been told you're not the guy. And now I'm giving you a chance to beat out these guys and show that in this system, you're our future. What's up, James?
Yeah,
is that your hand?
Yeah. The Cowboys have kind of done that before. They took Drew Bledsoe after he had been discarded from the Bills. And they had him in the locker room, and they had Tony Romo. And I guess Tony Romo, correct me on this, but I think, did he take over for Bledsoe in kind of a similar manner to Brady?
Yeah, I mean, Romo was a total lotto ticket. He was undrafted.
Mm-hmm.
And then when he got into the building, they immediately were like, oh, there might be something to this guy. I remember when Tony Romo came about, even his name, I was like, Tony Romo from some small school, and what was it? Was it in Illinois?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, that's not going to be the quarterback of the future. But the dude just came in and took it away from Bledsoe. Yeah. I just think quit trying to be a genius and start trying to, genius is defined in the NFL by, we scouted it and we found the guy and all our chips are in on the guy. Start buying yourself insurance policy and optionalities and lotto tickets until you find the guy. The other version of this is what the Cardinals did. They drafted Josh Rosen. I think it was 10th or 11th overall. And the very next year, they drafted Kyler Murray. A lot of teams wouldn't do that. Yeah, we've already spent the top 10 pick. We're all in on Josh Rosen. No, more. Keep drafting. And the Giants should have been doing this for years with Daniel Jones. And if Daniel Jones is better at the end of it and wins, great. Then you won. You got a self-franchise quarterback. If that position is that important, in the end, my thoughts are get as many as you can for as cheap as you can and get the right staff that can take advantage of these guys and their unique individual strengths. All right. That's going to do it for me today here on The Will Cain Show. Subscribe to our podcast, Apple or Spotify. Subscribe to Ruthless. And we will see you again, same time, same place, next time.